Tony Atlas just named 6 wrestlers he says he'll never forgive. And some of these stories are absolutely wild. So let's dive in and get straight into all the drama. 1. Hulk Hogan. When you talk about Tony Atlas and Hulk Hogan in the early 1980s, you're talking about two very different personalities clashing in the WWF. This was before Hulkamania exploded and made Hogan a worldwide icon. At this time, Hogan was still carving out his place in wrestling, and Tony Atlas was already a respected, powerful, and charismatic wrestler in his own right. That mix made for a heated rivalry. From Tony Atlas's perspective, there were plenty of reasons for frustration. Hogan had this undeniable charisma, the kind that drew fans in instantly, but at the same time, some of the veterans, including Atlas, felt he was getting more attention than he had earned. Tony prided himself on his strength, skill, and experience, and he worked hard to earn respect from fans and colleagues. Watching someone like Hogan rise so fast, with a lot of hype, naturally rubbed him the wrong way. Their matches in the early 1980s reflected that tension perfectly. Tony Atlas was all power and athleticism, bringing an aggressive style to the ring, while Hogan was starting to show his larger-than-life persona, full of confidence and showmanship. The contrast between the two made for exciting matches. Atlas would try to overpower Hogan, while Hogan used his growing popularity and clever tactics to get an edge. It wasn't just about wrestling, it was about pride, ego, and who deserved the spotlight. One notable aspect of their rivalry was how it positioned both men. Tony Atlas wanted to prove he was a top star, someone fans should cheer for, while Hogan was slowly becoming the face of the company, learning how to win over crowds with charisma, energy, and the promise of Hulkamania. Atlas's frustration came not just from losing matches, but from feeling overshadowed in a company where he had worked so hard to make a name for himself. In promos and interviews at the time, Atlas didn't hide his dislike for Hogan's attitude or the way he was being pushed. This added fuel to the rivalry and made their matches feel personal. Fans could sense the tension, and that made every encounter more engaging. Collaborated. 2. Gun Stud. When you look at Tony Atlas versus Big John Studd, it's all about raw power. These two men were absolute forces of nature, and their rivalry in the WWF centered around one thing: strength. While most wrestlers relied on speed, technique, or showmanship, Atlas and Studd faced each other in contests that were pure tests of muscle, often called slam challenges or other strength-based matches. For fans, these matches were exciting. For Atlas, they were personal battles that sparked real tension. Tony Atlas was a powerhouse himself, known for his athleticism and explosive energy. But Studd was a giant in every sense of the word. Towering and massive, Studd had this intimidating presence that made every match feel like a challenge before it even began. Atlas, however, was never the type to back down. He prided himself on being able to match anyone in strength and stamina, and Studd became the perfect rival to test that pride. Their matches were simple but brutal. It wasn't about elaborate sequences or technical holds. It was about lifting, slamming, and overpowering each other. In a slam challenge, Atlas would try to use his agility and raw athleticism to outmaneuver Studd, while Studd relied on sheer size and strength to dominate. The back and forth in these contests created an ongoing story. Could Atlas topple a mountain like Studd? Or would the giant crush him every time? The rivalry was fueled by more than just in-ring competition. Promos and interviews often added tension, with Atlas talking about proving he was the stronger man, while Studd boasted about being unbeatable. Fans could feel the animosity and were drawn into the drama, cheering for Atlas to rise and booing Studd for every move that looked like pure intimidation. Over time, the rivalry cemented itself as one of the defining power clashes in early WWF history. Atlas never truly defeated Studd in every contest, but every match was a statement. Atlas's determination, pride, and refusal to be outdone made him a perfect foil for Studd. and the Giants' dominance made every victory, or near victory, feel like a huge accomplishment. 3. Ole Anderson. Tony Atlas's feud with Ole Anderson in Georgia Championship Wrestling was a classic clash of styles and personalities. At the heart of the rivalry was the NWA Georgia Heavyweight Championship, a prized title that both men were desperate to claim. Atlas, known for his incredible athleticism, speed, and raw power, was everything Ole Anderson was not. Ole, on the other hand, was a calculating, methodical wrestler with a tough, old-school approach, and he had a reputation for bending the rules to win. That combination made their rivalry feel intense, personal, and high stakes. For Atlas, there was more to the hate than just the belt. Ole Anderson represented everything frustrating about the traditional wrestling system. He was part of the Four Horsemen faction, known for their dominance and for making the path to the title nearly impossible. Anderson would use underhanded tactics, team interference, and relentless mind games to get the upper hand. Atlas, a proud competitor, hated that Ole often tried to cheat his way to victory instead of proving himself in a clean fight. Their matches were tense, filled with hard-hitting action and dramatic moments. Atlas relied on his explosive moves, showing off speed and power that few could match, while Ole used his technical knowledge, roughness, and cunning to try to control the pace. Every encounter felt like a chess match in the ring, with Atlas constantly fighting not only for the title, but also for respect. The fans could feel that tension, and it made every match feel electric. The promos leading up to the matches added fuel to the fire. Atlas would call out Anderson for being sneaky, ruthless, and disrespectful, while Ole would taunt Atlas for being flashy, inexperienced, or not smart enough to survive the Georgia wrestling scene. Their verbal battles heightened the drama and made each match more than just a fight. It was a personal grudge being settled in front of the audience. When Atlas finally got a chance to claim the NWA Georgia Heavyweight Championship, it wasn't just about winning a belt. It was about proving he could outlast and outsmart one of the toughest, most calculating wrestlers in the territory. The victory, or even a close match, was a major statement. 4. Ivan Koloff. Tony Atlas's rivalry with Ivan Koloff was one of those classic battles where it felt like two forces of nature were constantly colliding. Koloff, famously known as the Russian Bear, had a reputation for being cold, ruthless, and intimidating in the ring. Atlas, on the other hand, was all energy, power, and charisma. From the moment they faced off, you could feel the tension. This wasn't just a wrestling match, it was a clash of personalities and styles. One of the reasons Atlas hated Koloff, at least in storyline, was Koloff's sheer presence and intimidation factor. The Russian Bear had this look that made fans and wrestlers alike feel nervous. Towering, menacing, and unrelenting, Koloff played the perfect villain. He wasn't flashy, but he was brutal and direct, always willing to hurt his opponent to make a point. For Atlas, who took pride in both his strength and his ability to entertain the crowd, facing Koloff was frustrating. He had to fight harder than ever just to keep up with someone who was built like a tank and wrestled with such relentless aggression. Their matches were intense and often physical. Atlas would rely on his speed, athleticism, and raw power to try to outmaneuver Koloff, but the Russian Bear's brute force kept him on edge. Many of their contests, including those in Memphis in the early 1980s, felt like wars rather than typical wrestling matches. Koloff would wear Atlas down with hard strikes and calculated attacks, while Atlas had to use every bit of his energy and skill to fight back. The drama wasn't just in the moves, they were telling a story of determination versus intimidation. Another layer to their rivalry was the audience reaction. Fans loved Atlas and wanted him to overcome Koloff's dominance. Every punch, slam, and near fall was amplified because the audience could feel the struggle and the tension. Koloff's cold, villainous persona made the stakes feel higher, and Atlas's determination made fans root for him even harder. 5. Flair. Tony Atlas's rivalry with Ric Flair in Georgia Championship Wrestling was one of those matchups where skill, ego, and style clashed at the highest level. Flair, known as the Nature Boy, was the ultimate showman, charismatic, slick, and always confident that he was the best wrestler in the room. Atlas, by contrast, was a powerhouse, a man of pure athleticism and raw strength, who believed in hard work, determination, and proving himself in the ring. That natural contrast made their rivalry personal, intense, and incredibly entertaining. From Atlas's perspective, part of the hate came from Flair's personality. Flair wasn't just a heel, he was the kind of wrestler who loved to get under your skin. He boasted constantly, flaunted his charm, and knew exactly how to manipulate fans and opponents alike. For Atlas, who took pride in his honesty, power, and ability to work hard for every fan's cheer, Flair's arrogance could be infuriating. It wasn't just that Flair was a skilled wrestler, it was the way he acted like he was untouchable. Their confrontations often centered around the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. Atlas was fighting not only to win a prestigious title, but also to prove that he could go toe-to-toe with a master strategist like Flair. Flair, of course, played his role perfectly. He would use his cleverness, his technical ability, and his cunning tactics to stay one step ahead. Whether it was turning the match in his favor through quick thinking or psychological tricks, Flair knew how to make every encounter about more than just brute force. Atlas, meanwhile, relied on his athleticism and sheer power. He would try to dominate the Nature Boy with strength, throwing Flair around the ring, using his speed to counter moves, and trying to show that raw talent and determination could match Flair's craftiness. Every match had moments of drama, near falls, reversals, and heated exchanges that kept fans on the edge of their seats. The feud was also fueled by promos and interviews. Flair would taunt Atlas, claiming the title was always out of reach, while Atlas fired back, vowing to show Flair that he could stand as the top man in Georgia. That tension made their rivalry feel real, intense, and personal. 6. Orndorff. Tony Atlas's rivalry with Paul Orndorff was one of those feuds that combined action in the ring with real tension behind the scenes. While many rivalries are purely for show, the Atlas-Orndorff feud had a layer of reality that made it feel personal, intense, and unforgettable. Fans could sense it in their matches, and the drama didn't stop once the bell rang. In the ring, Atlas and Orndorff were a perfect storm of power and aggression. Both men were incredibly strong and athletic, capable of delivering hard-hitting moves that left the crowd gasping. Their matches were physical, brutal, and often fast-paced, with each man trying to prove he was stronger, tougher, and smarter than the other. Atlas brought his explosive energy and raw strength, while Orndorff combined his own power with a calculated, aggressive style that made him a dangerous opponent for anyone. What made the feud especially heated was a well-known backstage incident that added real-life tension to their storyline. While the exact details are part of wrestling lore, it's clear that something happened that caused friction between the two, and that friction carried over into their in-ring performances. Atlas wasn't just trying to beat Orndorff, he was trying to assert himself against someone he genuinely had animosity toward. That made every slam, every strike, and every near fall feel loaded with emotion. The rivalry was more than just physical. Promos and interviews played a huge role in building the tension. Atlas often called out Orndorff for being reckless, egotistical, or disrespectful, while Orndorff fired back with his own boasts, claiming he was stronger and more deserving of the spotlight. That verbal sparring added layers to the rivalry, giving fans more than just a wrestling match. They were witnessing a real clash of personalities. Every encounter was unpredictable. Atlas's explosive bursts of power met Orndorff's controlled aggression head-on, creating moments of near chaos that made each match feel like it could go either way. Fans loved the intensity because it felt authentic, dangerous, and emotional. And that's a wrap for today's video. Make sure to like and subscribe so you never miss an update, and we'll see you again soon.